see that numbers, it looks very unfair because we work the same hours, you work hard as the same, and sometimes even harder to prove that
Usually
we actually
harder.
good.
Yeah.
We actually need to, doing double, triple than someone else just to prove that we actually are good at the job.
Gender inequality is, fairly profound in many locations. But in Australia, things are particularly difficult. The Australian wine industry is decades behind when it comes to addressing diversity in all its forms, and I think gender is just one of those. We are not going to see rapid change. We are going to continue to see change at a snail's pace, which is very disheartening. The more diversity you have, particularly in leadership positions, the better the overall results of that business. So all wine businesses should be doing whatever they can to pursue diversity in their workforce. People are unaware of just how misogynistic Australian culture can be, particularly in the wine industry.
Good morning, Jane. It's not a long time, now, like many people we actually have it for around the world. I'm so glad now I get one from Australia, so we're having the same time zone. How are you, Jane? How are you doing?
I'm really well. Thanks, Priscilla. It's wonderful to be chatting to you this morning on the same time zone.
So Jane, tell us, I'm really a big fan of you. We follow your work. I love what you do. One of the things that really got my attention is actually what you do for the woman in the wine industry here in Australia. You pretty much bring us a different perspective and give us a voice in the wine industry. And then I think that's something is quite unique. And I think it's like if you were the first and probably the biggest. I don't know if you have anyone else doing the same thing you do in Australia. And I want you to talk about where this passion come from and how you end up to advocate for us, pretty much how everything is started.
Sure. So I've spent the last, it's going to be 12 years now, focused on two things. One is bringing female wine consumers together to provide their own space where they can experience, taste, talk, and share wines. And the second thing is providing that exact platform to showcase female wine producers at the same time. So the Fabulous Ladies Wine Society started 12 years ago for consumers, but we wanted to promote women wine producers in those experiences that we create for female wine consumers. And what happened really quickly, Priscilla, is that I saw that the women in the Australian wine industry were not given many platforms. And in fact, coming into the wine industry, this was my third career, and I was quite horrified at the lack of diversity and gender equality that was very evident from my very early work working in Australian wine. And I've been someone who has always been quite fierce in terms of addressing injustice and what I see as unfairness. And so I had this very unique opportunity to actually do something about it, because my career was not in any way dependent on other men in the wine industry. And so I had this opportunity to provide a platform, to provide a voice, and to get quite vocal about what I was seeing, because nothing was being jeopardized in terms of where I was sitting, as it would be for women working in wine production or other wine roles in the wine industry. If you're a vocal woman standing up for injustice in a workplace, there are usually quite serious consequences for you and your career. I didn't have that on me. So I actually saw that it was an obligation more than anything that I had to address this in the best way I could. It's been my honor and my privilege to do that over the last 12 years, but I certainly haven't done it alone. So in addition to the Fabulous Ladies Wine Society, my consumer business, I also started Australian Women in Wine back in 2015 as a way to bring women together and to try and focus on some of these gender inequality injustices. And I've had a very fantastic board of advisors made up of industry luminaries, for lack of a better description, just amazing industry luminaries. And those people have changed somewhat over the years. Some of them have stayed the entire 9 years, but we have gone through a few people because we bring in that expertise. They help guide the direction that Australian Women in Wine are taking. And I'm just so grateful. So it's certainly not something I'm doing on my own. I certainly have some amazing support from women and men in the industry, but it's been a very long and difficult journey because I think the Australian wine industry is decades behind when it comes to addressing diversity in all its forms. And I think gender is just one of those.
Do you see lots of difference in salaries or differences like in actually positions, I would say? Like, do you feel like it is something we need to really to change the wine industry? That there is not many women CEOs, or what do you see today? What do you want to share about Australia woman in the
It
wine
doesn't really
industry?
matter what I see, and it doesn't really matter what you see. What's important are facts. So I actually come from a science background. I have a science degree and I was a psychologist as my first career. And so I'm very interested in research and facts because anecdotal evidence can be very helpful, and your own personal experience and your own personal story is incredibly powerful. But in fact, it's research and facts that help to drive understanding and provide us with the framework we need to know what sort of problem it is and how to address that. So what I have found in the Australian wine industry is that research has been woefully lacking in this area. So we don't have clear data or clear numbers as to what sort of representation women have across the different roles. All we can do is look at census data that comes back. So some of that is a little bit optimistic and a little bit positive. So the most recent census count showed us that overall participation of women in the Australian wine industry is increasing. But we don't know, yes, it's great, right? But we don't know really the breakdown of roles in that, in terms of who's in really senior roles and who's in really junior roles. What we do know is that it should be equal numbers, of course, because we don't have any trouble attracting women into the wine industry. We have, thanks to the universities letting us know, around about equal numbers of men and women graduating from enology degrees. Right, so attracting women into the industry is not our problem. Women want to come into the wine industry in Australia. They want to train hard, they want to study hard, they want to work in winemaking and viticulture. What happens is they don't hang around very long. They drop out in quite significant numbers, and we don't know why because we've never had the research done. All we can do is talk about the anecdotal evidence that we have, which is that women tell us over and over again that they are not being treated fairly in the workplace, that workplace culture is not friendly to women or to diversity of any kind. And so it's not and also their career progression is halted. They are held up from advancing in their careers. Again, we don't know exactly why. I have some theories, but we don't have the research to back up exactly why. And so what we've been calling for over the last 10 years is for some research to be done to really identify what's going on in Australian wine workplaces and why are women leaving in droves. And so I'm really glad to know that that research is actually about to commence finally. So they've just started putting together some tenders. Wine Australia is funding that. And they're about to appoint a research team to do that sort of research. We have had some smaller studies sort of done over the years, but again, only anecdotal results. So here at Australian Women in Wine, we ran a survey back in 2016, which asked women working in the wine industry what was going on in their workplaces. And we found, 2/3 had reported that they'd experienced sexism in the workplace. And so we do have some of these sort of smaller studies that are done, but they are not broad research-based studies that can be used to create significant, structural changes in the industry. And that's what we really need.
Yeah, I guess it's like again, I don't have the facts, but I have heard. Or in the wine industry, maybe that's just gonna be something, some problems. I'm not sure if you have seen that as well. But I have some woman that said to me, like in some of the jobs interviews, for like in making wines and things like that in Australia, they'd be asking to her like if she is going to have her kids anytime soon.
An illegal
Like,
question, right?
like
Illegal. We are.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we understand the vintage time. You need to require lots of time for,
Sure.
like to be present and the winery and the things like that. And then there is something like these questions and these things. I think that's probably it's why, maybe, not sure, because I don't have factors, I don't have the research to background that. It's just the things that I have been reported about another woman in the wine industry. That is why one of the reasons some of them is, for example, don't keeping, like the career in the wine industry. It is like, as a mean as well, I work as a sommelier. I work in sommelier on the floor, for example. It's hard for me. I have a baby of 2 years old to be till 3 or 4 a.m. on the floor, for example. I think there is something there in the wine industry we maybe need to address different. But I think there is so many other things like that. So if it don't find some other things to do, I could not keep work on the floor and come back home like 3 a.m. because I have a, like breastfeeding and things like that when my daughter was born and things like that. So I guess it's, if someone would probably find other types of jobs, in the wine industry, and some just try to, I completely changed my career from the floor to other things I'm doing. But, I think that's something, you see the same thing there as well. Do you feel like because
Yes, but that's not
family?
unique. Yes, but it's not unique to the wine industry. So those are structural things that prevent women in workplaces from continuing on in their existing career or advancing their career, because those structural things are in place. For example, we are going to roster you on until 3 a.m. for your shift, or until 2 a.m. for your shift. And so how can anybody be at home looking after their small child when that's the situation? But it's women who that seems to apply to more. So why are we not saying this to young dads? Why is the issue just for young women who have babies? Why is it not for young dads who have babies as well? We put up these structural problems for women, and we tell them, take on the role of looking after the small child, and you have to continue the same shifts, the same work, the same everything. We're not going to change anything for you. It's just, all of those obstacles are set up to unfairly make sure that women have to step away. So those workplaces should be saying, well, what do the young dads here need? Just as much as they're saying, what do the young mums here need? What do humans need to thrive in both their workplaces and their homes right now? And what do we need to do structurally in our workplace to support those humans to thrive in both locations? But for some reason, it's just women and their children that are looked at rather than men and their children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it needs to be more flexible, and then to be, the responsibility needs to be both. And that's what I like it, because I research about you. I know you have 3 kids, and then you have like a partner very supportive, I guess, because you travel everywhere. You're doing lots of things in Australia, like, like you have your business, the Fabulates Wine Society, when you're doing tours, you're doing events. I see you pretty much everywhere around Australia. You're very busy.
Absolutely. I travel a lot. Yes. And I'm not lucky. I expect that, because I think everybody should have a partnership. So I don't say I've got a very supporting partner, aren't I lucky? I say, isn't he lucky? That we have found each other and that we can have a partnership where both of us are supported. And so he travels just as much as I do for work, and no one has ever asked him, oh my goodness, what happens when you're away? Whereas it always comes up in every conversation I have, including right now, oh, Jane, you travel so much, you've got 3 kids. I'm like, sure, my husband does too. Nobody ever asks him that question.
Exactly, that's how it should be, and that's how it should actually be. And then tell me about what are you doing today? So you're doing lots of things for the wine industry, because you, for example, work with your wineries where the owner or the winemaker or the viniculture is all warmer based, and you promoting these wineries, and you do have your business as well for B2C, where business to consumers, where it's this beautiful winey, warmer community, then enjoy wines, and then you pretty much connected both together. That's
Yes.
exactly what I do. That's what.
That's well said. So, yeah, so my consumer focused business is about bringing female wine consumers together and introducing them to women who produce wine. But, you know, I'm promoting women in wine at the same time by doing that. So I exclusively work with females in the wine industry. So they can be in production, they can be CEOs of their companies. It doesn't really matter. It takes all sorts of roles to create wine. And so I want to highlight all of them. That's from the Fabulous Ladies Wine Society point of view. For Australian Women in Wine, that is very much an industry-focused arm of what I do. And previously, prior to COVID, we ran the Australian Women in Wine Awards, an awards program that looked at and highlighted all the different roles in the wine industry. We ended up having about 8 different awards by the end. So everything from winemaker to marketer to cellar door operator, we were looking at all of these women in all of these roles and really celebrating their achievements. In the last couple of years, we've now started running Women in Wine symposiums, which is like a full day of gathering women together to support, empower and encourage, and also continue to push the agenda forward in terms of what we want to see for equality in the Australian wine industry. So Australian Women in Wine is not funded. We do receive sponsorship when we actually have an activity that we're undertaking. So, for example, when the awards were happening, we had sponsorship for those awards. When we're running a symposium, we attract sponsors for that symposium. But in between all of that work we're doing, having conversations like this, talking to media, pushing out, the story about gender equality in Australian Women in Wine, trying to nurture and support women across the country, we don't receive any funding for that. There's no funding. There's no sort of formal support from the Australian industry to make that happen. In fact, one of the things I find the most shocking, Priscilla, is that the overall budget for all diversity, equality and inclusion programs from Wine Australia, the previous and the current calendar year, is zero. So there's actually, it's zero. So there is no allocation of funding to diversity and equality and inclusion programs. I would love for somebody to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but from what we can see, from what we can tell in the publicly printed and publicly published budgets, there is nothing. And so we are quite horrified about this, that in 2024, in an industry which is clearly has diversity and equality issues, this is not being funded. And what do we know about problems that are not actually given funding for solutions? They don't change. They don't change. And so what I said earlier about some of the stats showing some positive movement in terms of women's participation in the industry, other stats are actually very terrifying. So we recently had some stats back from the ATO which showed that the gender pay gap for winemakers in Australia has actually doubled in the last 8 years in the wrong direction. So in the 2013-2014 financial year, the gender pay gap between male and female winemakers was $7,000. In the 2020-2021 financial year, that pay gap had doubled to $14,000.
Really?
That is publicly available information. So we highlighted that a few months ago here at Australian Women in Wine. It got a lot of attention because people just don't realise that this is happening. It's not talked about, it's not addressed, the issue is not given any attention. What's really good, though, is that there is a diversity and equality committee that Australian Grape and Wine set up some years ago now, which is fantastic. Amazing, amazing people on that committee. Unfortunately, they are all volunteers, right? So again, no one is being paid for their time or expertise here, trying to solve this massive problem and put forward solutions with no funding, with no focus, with no kind of overarching strategy from the top level. So until as an industry, we can appropriately recognize and understand what the problem is through research, provide and budget and allocate the funding needed to provide solutions, we are not going to see rapid change. We are going to continue to see change at a snail's pace, which is very disheartening.
It's very disappointed.
Mhm.
Oh no, it is something I didn't even know. Like you don't really have any support at all from anywhere. You do pretty much by yourself, step by step. It's quite a full on, and it's very hard. And you see that numbers, and this it looks very unfair because we work the same hours. You work hard as the same, and sometimes even harder because to prove that we
Usually
actually
harder.
good.
Yeah,
We actually need to doing double triple than someone else because like just to prove you we actually are good at the job.
yeah,
Yeah, it's insane. It's really insane. It's really unfair because we and then probably they have the same qualifications in everything. It's not about
absolutely.
qualifications, it's not about experience, it's about just
Can I tell you what it's
it's
about?
very sad.
I'd love to tell you what it's about. It's about unconscious bias in the recruitment and promotion of women. And so this is not unique to the Australian wine industry. This is very, very
Global.
common throughout industries. It's not just unique to wine, and it's not just unique to Australia, that there is a bias against women, particularly in high achieving or leadership positions. There is a bias against women's leadership qualities, which are seen differently to men's. This is all research based. So whether or not you believe you have a bias against women, chances are you do, even women do, because against other women, because we are all raised in a society where a bias against women is just normalized. And so we actually sort of internalize a lot of these messages that we see and hear and read growing up, and we take them on and we don't even realize we have them. Now, this is not anything to be surprised at, because as human beings, our brains rely on biases. To be human is to be biased, because your brain cannot handle all of the information coming at it day in, day out without using biases and stereotypes. That is how our brain organizes information and helps us to simplify what we're taking in each day and make it useful information in the future. The problem, so to be human is to be biased. There's no way around it. So when people say, oh, in my unbiased opinion, straight out, that is false. There is no such thing as an unbiased opinion. We all have biases. What needs to happen is that we actually need to become aware of our own biases and to challenge them when it happens. And to do that, you really have to step outside your comfort zone and receive in some way, shape or form training around this. Now, you can get away your whole life without having any training in your unconscious biases, but if you are in a recruitment or managerial position where your decision making affects the career of others, then it is in your interest and in the interest of the company that you're working for to receive unconscious bias training so that you become aware of your own biases, which are normal and human, and you have the ability to counter those when they happen so that you can make better decisions and improve the overall diversity of your work team. That's what has to happen. That's the sort of work I used to do 25 years ago as an organizational psychologist. That's what I don't see happening in the Australian wine industry. I don't see or hear about anybody receiving that sort of training, and yet you are responsible for the career progression or the recruitment of all of these people. And if you are not aware, you are going to keep recruiting people who you like, who are like you. That is just what happens. That is what happens in every industry, not just wine. And so, if you want change, you have to address your unconscious bias, not just for gender, but for everything, and to not feel guilty about it, to not feel condemned at the idea that we have to do this. It's more that as humans, to support each other, this is what we need to do, to unpick our existing biases and become aware so that we can be more empathic and better decision makers.
It's amazing, like how you're building your speech by your experience in the wine, your experience in the equality, the woman, the wine industry, but not just that, but you actually address the problem as a problem in overall, and in use your psychology experiences, like as like to understand how the brain works to explain how everything needs to be done to be able to change the situation. I really like the whole explanation because it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Because exactly what's actually happening in your brain. It just see we most of the time, if you drive a car, you don't really pay attention. You drive a car every day because it just
That's
became
right.
automatically. And
That's
then
right.
that's for me. That's the analogy that's coming to my
The
head
biasing.
when you
Yeah.
when you start
Great
talking about that.
analogy. It's a great analogy
Yeah.
because it's so your brain, so your frontal cortex, which is your thinking, the really sort of problem solving thinking part of your brain, that tends to engage last. So
Yeah.
your brainstem is what engages first, and the automatic centers of your brain are what engage first. And you only start applying your frontal cortex when some serious deep level thinking is needed here, right? The rest of the time we're just going about our daily business quite automatically. And so your biases are your brain's way of going, okay, bang, bang, here's some quick info, like here's how you drive a car, here's how you turn left in your analogy. Here's the, without having to think about it. And so when it comes to understanding your biases, it's like when that happens, when you go, I've got a short list of all male white candidates here. What do I need to do? What do I need to do? What have I missed about this? Why have I got this? What's going on with me? And not to feel bad about that, not to feel condemned by that in some way, but okay, this is me as a human. I have failings. My brain is biased. I need to be aware of this, and I need to work harder to start engaging my thinking brain when those automatic thoughts start to come.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I love it, and then I like it, and then that's so many work you have done for the last 12 years, and you have been recognized for that as well. Because the year in 2015, we went to Napa in California, and you represent Australia wine and an event about women and the wine industry over there. And last year, you actually got a medal of the Order of Australia for your service you have done in the Australian ones. You'll be recognized for the all efforts we have done. Unfortunately, it's not an easy thing. It's quite a challenging thing, but at least people see you as a woman can really stand out for the work you do.
That's very kind. Of course, you don't do anything. I don't do anything for that. It was all, those things are always a surprise when they happen. I'm very passionate about equality for women in any industry. It just happens to be that I'm working in the wine industry, and this is where my passions and focus are directed. But, in Australia, things are particularly hard. Jancis Robinson, the amazing wine writer and reviewer, she actually attended our Australian Women in Wine Awards ceremony in London in 2017. And JancisRobinson.com was a sponsor that year for one of our awards. So she was able to be there in person and present our winner in person with the award that she had sponsored. And what was wonderful was that she unexpectedly ended up giving a small speech as well in the presentation of that award. And forgive me because I'm going to paraphrase here, but it was captured on video and we can Google it afterwards. But she basically said, I have traveled to all the wine regions of the world many, many times. Gender inequality is, fairly profound in many locations. But in Australia, things are particularly difficult. And yes. And so I'll never forget, she sort of was a mic drop moment because it's often, I think, in Australia as a culture, we're seen as very fun loving, it's very easygoing. And I actually think that masks the problem that's happening here quite easily. And so people are unaware of just how misogynistic Australian culture can be, particularly in the wine industry.
Wow, that was such a powerful message. Yeah. And then for someone from outside of Australia,
correct. It meant more. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're exactly
Yeah,
right.
so you can see even better if you're outside of you know, and on the
Exactly.
stage. So yeah,
A bit of mirroring back. There was quite a bit of silence in the room when she said that.
yeah, I can imagine. Jane, another topic I wanted to talk to you today is about the like you know you have the other you're in the wine industry now, but before you work as psychologist and a pretty much a specialist, and the two things that we really miss in the wine industry. And I think I'd love to talk about these things like the behavior, the language, the communication. I know you pretty much specialize in these specific topics, and I know and you know, but I guess it's not something everyone know about it. It's how the language, how the communication is actually changed so much the behavior of consumers. And then I think it's some valuable things we can discuss it today. How we can actually, wineries, the business owners of B2B can do things better on the storytelling, to be able to you know like in fact to get more attention, in fact to attract it and engage with customers. And then I wanted to talk about those things with you, and because yeah, I think you're great what you do, and then you're talking so much like you have a beautiful storytelling when you're talking in your speeches. and then you're great in the communication, and I think that's something you'd be very valuable for us to learn from you. What do you have to share about like how we can actually build your storytelling?
Absolutely.
Like, I think that's the most difficult thing in the wine industry.
Excited. I get excited by this topic. Let me tell you why. So, there's many theories and many people postulating theories out there about what it is that makes us human. Okay, so what is it about us that separates us from other primates, from other animals? What is it fundamentally that makes us human? Because many of the theories out there fall down the minute you say, the ability to speak, or because other animals seem to have some form of language or whatever, So my favorite theory, and one that's gathering lots of momentum, is the idea that what makes us human is that humans are storytellers. Our entire brain works this way. Our brain is reliant on storytelling. So our brain is like a giant library full of books, forever trying to find what page something is on to fill in that blank in the story. The way that we communicate with each other is all based on narrative. If I'm talking to you, Priscilla, or you're talking to me, and there's a miscommunication, okay, that's almost 100% due to the fact that the story I'm telling in my head is not the same as the story you're telling in your head about what we've just said to each other. Okay? When information is lacking or not clear, our brain fills in the gap. It fills in the gap to complete the story. And sometimes that's so real that we believe that that's the truth. And so that's why you have so many people saying there's multiple truths, her version is different to my version, What they're really saying is that her story is different to my story, because my brain has filled in the gaps this way, and here's the story I'm telling myself, and your brain has filled in the gaps that way, and here's the story you're telling yourself, even though we might have experienced the same thing. So our brain is all about storytelling. If you've ever gone to therapy or had any kind of counseling, what you're doing is talking and creating a narrative with your therapist about your feelings and your emotions. And what's that therapist doing in reply? Hopefully helping you to reframe your story, or get you to look again at what story you're telling yourself so that you can change the story. It's all about storytelling, how we go through each and every day, how our brains work, how we communicate with each other is all about storytelling. And the idea that people in business don't understand this is quite horrifying. So It's what makes us human, I think, and so do many others. B, it's literally how we function every day, how we function. So what I always find interesting is that, particularly in business, people think that, well, everybody thinks that humans are logical beings that have emotions. Actually, the opposite is true. Humans are emotional beings that sometimes apply logic. And think about what you said moments earlier about your brainstem going first. It does. Your emotions fire way before your thinking brain kicks in. Okay, so we are at our core emotional beings that sometimes can apply logic when things are going on. Okay, so what? So when you are,
I love it. I love it. That's the explanation. Still learning new things every day. Great.
It's 100% what we are. And anybody who says the opposite has not looked at the research about how our brains work. Okay. So, and the reason for this is evolutionary, because your legs are already moving hell fast from fear when that lion is approaching your camp, long before you go, what's the best way to deal with this lion? Okay, so it's an evolutionary advantage that we are emotional beings before we are logical beings. It's also an evolutionary advantage that we have both. We have both, but our emotions will always kick in first. Always. Now, what happens with that means that when, as a storytelling creature, what we are trying to do is actually engage emotions before we try and engage people's logic. Okay, because that's a more human connection. A more human connection is an emotional connection. You might get people on board, or you might get people interested in you through the facts and the figures, but the more likely way, the more human way, is to do that through an emotional connection through storytelling. So no marketing or advertising agency will tell you it's about facts and figures when you're trying to communicate your brand to an audience. They will always tell you it's about storytelling. What I'm hoping our conversation is doing today is explaining why that's the case. Okay, why that's the case is because of what we've just said, that we are emotional beings first and foremost, and that we are storytelling beings. And so whenever you are trying to create or nurture a customer relationship, it should always be based on storytelling, and it should always be based on eliciting emotion.
So, and then we wanted to know how we can actually build a storytelling, because I think there is a misconception or misunderstanding about storytelling, because when that's, you explain very well the emotional and the facts. I think that's
Yes.
something really powerful, because I have a talk with some people in the wine industry, and they think storytelling is about how many types of the soils they have in the property. That's facts.
Yes, correct.
So that's the logical bit. You know, and I think that's just the thing we talk about the facts. It's like they think the storytelling is to tell how long the wine is spent in the oak and things like that. That's all facts. That's all logical. That's it. And then what is actually emotional? Because I think that's people really struggling to tell the story and to actually touch the emotional of people, because the fact is easy for most of people. Like there is it's just the pretty much, you can just Google as well if you wanted to talk about some specific things, and then putting that on your socials, you know, a copy paste kind of thing, you know, be all for your words and that's it. Or you have all these factors, because you can't really change because how the wine was made, or what, or how the soils and things like that. So easy to talk about it. But how do you actually talk about the emotional? Because I think that's what people struggling with.
Sure. So look, you know, storytelling is a craft. That's why writing and, you know, and authors and people in that craft are quite revered, and they talk about the fact that it's a labor, because storytelling is a craft. But at its heart, it usually starts with the sharing of vulnerability in some way. So, for example, I'm sort of trying to nurture that human connection by revealing something about yourself. And so, for example, if I'm talking about a Chardonnay, Okay, so we're there, we're at a wine tasting, and I want to introduce the customer to this Chardonnay that my company has made. As you were saying, Priscilla, the usual way would be, and it's gone through Malo, and it's single vineyard, and there's this much sun, and sure, all interesting, and you can tell some kind of story through that. But a way to get to the heart of something and to show vulnerability early is to put that Chardonnay into some kind of personal context for you, and to self-reveal as much as you feel comfortable doing in that process. So off the cuff, for example, it might be something like, this is the Chardonnay that I chose to serve at my 1-year-old's christening. And let me tell you why, because I knew that my mother-in-law had never really been a fan of Sauvignon Blanc. My father-in-law really and everybody was coming and I was feeling nervous. I wasn't quite sure which white wine we should actually try and use here. Chardonnay can be really polarizing, as you know, but I had so much confidence in this one. My heart and soul went into the production of this, and I really wanted to be able to share that with my family on the day. Suddenly I'm in, right? You're in. You're like, okay, what happened at this christening? Did people like it? What happened with the mother-in-law? And I'm just making this up off the cuff, right? Imagine if there's a real story here. So suddenly you're like, I'm interested in this Chardonnay. I don't care how many. And then when you take that home, you're going to be remembering this amazing story behind this Chardonnay. Now, it's not like the other things don't matter. It's not like the sense of place and how it was made and all of that stuff doesn't matter. It does matter because you have to like that style of Chardonnay in the first place. The quality of the wine has to be there so that you're connecting with it as a product as well as connecting with it as a story. But here's the thing. If this tasting is happening at a cellar door, and this customer has come in, that customer is probably going to 4 or 5 cellar doors that day, is probably trying 10 to 15 different Chardonnays that day. Yeah. What is going to separate yours from all the others that they're trying? Connection and engagement. And so, that is what's going to help make that choice. That particular customer might like 8 out of the 10 Chardonnays that they're trying that day. What's going to make them connect with yours and continue to purchase over and over again? Some kind of human connection. And it's not conscious. This is not a conscious, I'm going to keep buying from them because they made me feel good and I'm really interested in that story. It all happens at a very subconscious level. But we feel like we've had some kind of connection here. This person has self-revealed. We're in on the story. We want to know. We can take that Chardonnay home and also share that story with the friends we're going to open it with. So they're in on the story, and suddenly storytelling and emotion are the entire reason why that Chardonnay is the one that got purchased that day.
And it became more authentic as well, because no one can copy you because it's your story.
Very well said.
It was the Chardonnay for your grandma, whatever. That's what we make it because someone else in your family didn't like it, Sauvignon Blanc. It's just that it's very unique. It's your family, it's you, and then no one is actually can copy that. And then we actually the styles or how the wine is made and things like that. You can find so many similar stories because like many of wines is spending 12 months in oak, or many of wines is doing cold maceration, whatever. Like all this kind of
four generations, family owned, all that sort of stuff as well. The other one that you hear over and over again, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's all these stories just became very repetitive, and there's something I try to talk so much about it, and we got a lot of attention in social media. It's exactly that, because it became like a recording kind of things. And when you're going to talk with producers of the wineries, they said the same thing, because my product is premium. I do the best in the world. They just want to produce the best quality. Everything to start from the vineyards. It's became pretty similar. The phrases and things. And what it actually stand out, I guess, is exactly what you said. Just like bring something completely new, unexpected, something almost personal, pretty much, because you say that's my family. That's what's happened to me. And that is why we bring this wine to you, and you give the why you make it. I think that's another powerful message you said today, because it's like, I making that because my family didn't like Sauvignon Blanc. You know, it's a why, to have a why to tell the customers, and the why is quite important, like in mental, like on the brain and things like that. Because automatically we wanted to know why of things, like when we came, why mom I can't do this, you know, like
why?
It's something like connecting that, because I think when we were 3 years old or 4 years old, we just, why mom I can't do this? Why? And I think all brain.
It's all part of the storytelling. You need to know why. You need to know how why that story is there. Where is it going to fit in that filing cabinet in my brain? Where? Do you know what I mean? Is it this kind of story? Is it that kind of story? Where is it going to fit into the narrative that I have going on here? Absolutely, you need to know why. There's no point reading a novel with no purpose, is there? There's always a purpose to every story. And so finding out why is part of our desire to understand the narrative.
Yeah. And then tell me more about it, like what else, like not only in the cellar doors, but what else we can tell our story better? Because I think what we can see, and because you actually got us some, like you're pretty good in digital as well. Like we see you everywhere on the digital space. And then you get a lot of your attention there as well. And how you actually tell these stories, not only in the cellar when you have the customer, but how we actually making better on the social media, because I think it's something like people really struggling and to get engagements these days, the wineries. I see like many Instagrams and stuff like that, and they have like 10 likes, 30 likes, 30 likes. They have 15,000 followers, but the engagement is very, very low. And then it's most of the time I just see like a bottle and, you know, like probably practice again about the wine. But what this is actually, people can talk a little bit better or engaging with people on the social media as well. And it's not necessary only for, I'm not talking specifically for groups like Jay-Z or millennials or whatever, because everyone have a different strategy for their business, a different target market. But in general, because I think it's something else, like people don't know how to do with social media. They think just put any picture there, it's going to be cool. They did the job. But I think like the type of pictures you put in there, the digital space, I know you pretty much specialize in that space as well. So you maybe could give some advice.
Well, I don't. I need to correct you. I don't, Priscilla. So I don't want to be. I actually don't like social media. I don't think it's a good storytelling platform. It can be used really well. You're right. There's people who are much better than others at using it. And they tend to be individuals rather than businesses and brands. Not always. There's some businesses and brands doing it really well, but you'll see the people who have the highest levels of engagement tend to be individuals. And that's because, again, it's that human-to-human connection. It's very hard for businesses and brands to get good engagement on social media. It really is, in or outside the wine industry. It's very hard. Because, you know, ultimately we're trying to sell you something, even though that's not what you're doing, you know, in good social media posts, you're not doing that. You're still ultimately doing that. And so, whereas the engagement with individuals, that's not the expectation. So there's a different engagement level there. But no, I've deliberately tell people I'm your in real life person. So I provide in real life experiences, events and tours. In real life is my area. It's my favorite area. I want to engage with you in real life. And that is what my business is built on. It's built on delivering in real life experiences. So I have to participate in the social media landscape, and I don't mind it. It's not awful. But I don't for brands and businesses, I have a lot of empathy, and I've done a lot of training and assistance with a lot of the brands that I work with to try and help them in this area. Because you're right, most brands and businesses are really average at it. But I always say to them, you know what, the system's against you from the start because it's social media. That's the whole idea. And to be social, you have to have connection. You have to, you know, understand what that person is bringing and want some of it. Now, if you're selling something, that's hard. That's really hard. So yeah, there's plenty of businesses and brands doing great guns on social media, and that's great. If they're just pushing product, that's great. Generally in the wine industry, we're not just pushing product, we're selling experience. We are, even if you've got wines, but that's very hard to do on a social platform. You're not just popping some makeup in the mail in a little satchel and sending it off to someone because somebody else said it was good, you know. Wine is a very much a social experience, and that's much harder to sell in a digital world.
Yeah, and then that's probably why it's so difficult to build like engaging platform, because it is something like lots of people struggling with at the moment.
Yeah,
So
you're right.
yes, it's not an easy thing.
No.
And then what is your advice for people, for business? We talk about the two very specific topics today: woman, Australian woman, the wine industry, and the powerful of storytelling for your
Yes.
experiences, because wine is experience and wine is the feeling you have. So that's what I'm telling you all the time in my searches, because that's what I believe in. But I wanted to finish this podcast with three advices from you, for all the people who's listening to this podcast, and to actually what they can building better for the business, for the future, for the wine business future.
Sure.
And in the one, please, one advice for us to put in your mind.
Yes.
And a woman in the wine industry. So what do we actually need to do to see more women in the wine industry on the, you know, like more equality between men and women. So be more flexible for in this word.
Sure. So to be more successful, wine businesses just need to build more diversity. It's as simple as that, because when you have a diverse workforce, you have more options for problem solving, better ideas, you have a better skill set overall generally in your business. And so diversity is the key to so many workplace issues. I can't even begin to tell you. And that is, again, research-based. The research will all tell you the more diversity you have, particularly in leadership positions, the better the overall results of that business. So that's a no-brainer. All wine businesses should be doing whatever they can to pursue diversity in their workforce. That means, in my view, everybody involved in recruitment and promotion of people in your business should be undertaking unconscious bias training now. It should be happening right now, and it should be refreshed regularly, and it should be something that's spoken about regularly as well in your workplace. And the companies that are doing this, guess what? Their diversity targets are being achieved much more quickly. And the other reason that it's fantastic to have diversity in your workforce is not just from a bottom line point of view. From a human engagement point of view, guess what? Your storytelling craft has suddenly exploded, because you have all of these individual experiences that can be shared and engaged with other people, other humans, to create relationships, whether they be customer relationships, whether they be B2B relationships, whether they be relationships with suppliers. At the end of the day, humans do business with other humans they like. That is what humans do. And so if you are good at telling your story, engaging with other humans, and developing that as a culture in your workplace, your business is going to thrive.
It's good. It's a very good advice. And it's good. It's great, because I think that's why you promote diversity and that work space where we actually be connected and a happy place as well to work with. Because I think if you connect and we all respect each other, I think it's going to be much fun and a happy place to work with as well. Like, and something like, I don't know how the numbers, and you probably know that, but many people isn't happy with their jobs, and probably the reasons it's about, the situations there, how people treat each other, and all again, psychology, brain things involved in these things as well. And then we just keep building ourselves like all this story. I don't like my workplace, and
Yeah,
then I think that's something we need to address as well. And I just compliment everything you said today. But I
great.
think it was wonderful interview. I really enjoy the way you explain things. I really like the way you put things together. I think it was very clear for me, the information, and I'm pretty sure it was clear for everyone who going to watching this. Because you put it like your speech was amazing. Like you put it like all the facts in the brain and how that's worked, and you just take us like pretty much take us in the hand. It's like, look, that is how it worked. Like this is the beginning, that's the middle, that's the end. So was great the way you explain things. I really appreciate it. Your communication is great, Jane. I really love
Oh,
it.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much for taking your time to be able to help us to building a better wine world.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for all the amazing work you do in highlighting how important it is for wine businesses to get to the heart of storytelling.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane.